Welcome to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, a podcast that brings personal stories from transplant survivors, their families, friends, and loved ones. This is where you will hear challenges and triumphs of everyone involved in this journey. Our guests will offer wisdom, advice, and inspiration on everything you want to know about transplant. My name is Jenny McFarland. I am a transplant survivor, and this is a podcast I wish I had before and immediately following my transplant. Thank you for listening. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast. This is Jenny McFarland, your host, and I just want to apologize. I know it's been quite a while since I've had an episode out. I've had a lot going on. I had a death in the family and just a lot going on. So I apologize for that. I do have a couple of episodes coming up. And my next episode will be the Transplant Games of America, all of the stories that everybody shared. So keep an eye out for that. It should be out in a couple weeks. And also, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review. You can visit the podcast website at www.pretoposttx.com. And you can send me a message or leave a comment on there for me. Just a quick thing on the Transplant Games. I'll touch more on it on the next episode, but it was the most amazing time I've had in a long time. And it was so incredible to get to meet so many people and talk to so many people. And the stories that everybody shared are so amazing. So please tune back in. I know it's taken a while, but I'll have it out shortly. So tonight's episode is a fantastic episode. It's with a living donor, and you all know how much I love and respect living donors. And this is a great story because it's not just about living donation, but it's a love story. And I'm a hopeless romantic, and I love love stories. And so this one is really cute and really great and really inspirational. So once you listen to this, if you love it, please share it with people because it's such an important topic that we need to educate people on about the importance of living donation and sharing your spare and the huge effect on multiple lives that you can have by being a living donor. And when people hear stories about living donation and they hear that it's a big deal, but it's manageable and it's, you can easily donate part of your liver or your kidney and still have a full normal life. And I think that this message is so important that if we had more living donors, we would have less people waiting for donors. So I'm going to stop rambling on and get on with this episode and let you listen to it for yourself and be inspired, just like I was. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. And I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I do. So please help me welcome my guest, Brandi Moberley. Hi, Brandi. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Jenny. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So we're going to talk today about your journey of being a living donor. So first, tell me what you donated and where you're from.
Okay, I was a liver donor for my boyfriend at the time. We are from Amarillo, Texas.
Oh, okay. All right. Not too far from me. I live in El Paso. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I guess it's kind of far. I mean, El
I
Paso's
mean,
way at the
everything
end.
in Texas seems far.
I know. So, okay. So tell me about your boyfriend. Tell me about what was going on with him. I want to hear all the mushy love stuff. So tell me
Oh,
about when you guys met and, how everything came about.
okay. Well, I will kind of give you a little bit of like backstory on my end, just a bit, and then yeah, I'll tell you all the good stuff. So, about a year and a half before Pete and I met, my marriage had ended, And I was just in a very, very hard place in my life. I mean, anyone who's gone through that knows the struggle. And I just, I kind of just had it in my head that I was never going to do that again, that I was great just raising my two amazing kids. They were 11 and 13 at the time. And, for me, that was my focus. And so ever doing this again was definitely not on my radar. Um, but, obviously God has different plans for us sometimes. So Pete and I met one night. I was out with two friends of mine, or I'm sorry, one friend of mine, that I had never, it was like our daughters were really good friends, and she was going through a similar situation as to what I went through, and kind of reached out to me, and she was just asking like, how did you do this? And so I gave her the same advice that a friend of mine gave me, and I said, you know what? We need to go have dinner, and you need to laugh. Like you need to just enjoy yourself and find the joy in life. So we ended up finding a night that we just random night that we decided to go to dinner. And she invited a friend of hers who I had never met, but it ended up being us three girls. And we just, our intentions were to go just to have fun girl night and just eat dinner and laugh. So um, the friend that I didn't know at the time, she knew Pete. And so this was during COVID, like right when everyone starts kind of, opening back up. And so
Right.
everyone was just so excited to be around other people, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
so she was like, "Oh, Pete knows I'm out and about with some friends, so he wants to come join us." Which was great. I didn't know him. I had, I mean, I don't mean this bad, but nothing like that mattered to me. I was like, great, whatever. But it wasn't on my radar to think anything of it. So, um, he ended up, so I knew nothing about him, of course, never had met him. Um, and so he, we were on like a rooftop patio, and I was kind of facing the door to the patio, entrance, and I see this guy walk out, which I didn't know it was Pete, and instantly, like I remember it like it was yesterday. He walks out, and this guy like instantly grabs my attention, which if you know me, you would know that is like so foreign because it was off my radar. I was not into that at all.
Yeah.
So when I see him on the like walk out, he's walking in a different direction, and I'm thinking, why did I even have that instinct of like looking or whatever? And then he turns and he starts walking towards our table, and I'm like, oh no, that's Pete. So it was just a weird, I mean, obviously I thought he was very attractive. But it was more than that. It was such a weird thing that I did. And it just, that has only happened one other time. So I was like, that was so strange that it even was an intuition like that. So, he comes and sits down, and it was kind of instant, like, just, as we started talking, probably 5, 10 minutes in, maybe he looked over at me and he was like, how do I know you? And I was like, I don't know. You seem very familiar to me, but I don't know. And we tried wrapping our minds around it. We asked questions like, where are you? Where are you from? Da, da, da. Couldn't come up with anything. So it was just that familiar like feeling, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so we just had a great time that night, just enjoying like just company, um and but there was something to it that was so different. And it was like this sense of like comfort and safety, and just, I don't know, he just made me feel so safe, but it wasn't anything. It was just us having dinner. There was just something about it. Anyway, so my friends were
Kind of
like,
like it's kind of like love at first sight, it sounds like.
100%, which I do
Yeah.
not ever listen. I am not one who would ever think that is a thing,
Yeah.
but it 100% was. I mean, there was just nothing else to it.
Yeah.
And it was just, in hindsight, as I tell this story, I know exactly what it was. It was I mean, just my belief. It was just those seeds being planted, and they had to be planted really early. And it's just God's way of working things out, which was so weird. But anyway, yeah, love at first sight, I would say would be, now I would say yes. Then I'd been like, heck no. But so my friends were like, he's coming for you. You better get ready. Like that's happening. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Well, so that following morning, he had sent me a message on Facebook and it just said, hey, you. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not answering. I was like, this guy needs a little bit of a challenge, probably. So, but I was a hairstylist. And so, I was up at the salon and my cousin works with me and just a bunch of my friends. And I'm like, y'all are not going to believe this, but I met someone last night and I was like, and I might be in trouble. But I knew that there was still that part of me that had a wall up so big because I didn't want to get hurt. So, I was like, oh, I was like, I don't know. And I said, he messaged me, what do I do? Like I was freaking out. So they were like, let us see him. So they, of course, look at the picture. And my cousin immediately says, no, don't do it. He's gonna break your heart. I was like, no, we don't know that. Like, but anyway, we were just laughing about it. But anyway, so from that point on, really, like I went several days of, him messaging me until it was like, well, I don't want to be rude. I need to say something to him. So I finally just left him a message back, just explaining like, it's nothing with you. It's my life and where I'm at right now and where my heart is. And just, I'm not at a place where I can do that yet. And he was so kind about it, but still he was like he was still, um, I don't even know, like he was understanding, but I said, I'm great with us, maybe just hanging out in groups. And so we kind of did that for a while, or, for a couple weeks, I mean, maybe a month or so, where we just kind of did that and got comfortable with the idea.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah, that's kind of how it started. But the whole time it was like there was no denying what it was. Like it was crazy. But anyway, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, that's not a normal feeling. So it was very much like, oh my gosh, what is happening to me? So
Right. So you were trying to fight it, but you just couldn't. Like he
mhm,
was your soulmate. So when that comes along, there's
100%.
just no getting around that. Like,
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
And you just listen to that. I'm a very intuitive person. And so, as much as I wanted to have control of myself and of my heart or whatever, again, I'm not the one who's totally in control here. So,
Right.
it was funny how that happened, and it's kind of that never say never kind of deal.
Yeah. So so you guys started dating, obviously. Like how long did it take before you realized something was wrong?
Okay, so he was very open with me, with so probably a few weeks in, well, I say a few weeks. It might have been a month in, something like that, but very early on, um, he did have a conversation with me and he said, he said, I kind of know a little bit about, your story, and I just feel like it's only fair for me to kind of give you um a little bit of insight into my life, and that way, if you feel like it's not something you can handle, then I respect that and you don't have to. So, he told me that he had PBC, which is primary biliary cholangitis, but it was also it used to be, I guess, called PBC was primary biliary cirrhosis. Anyway, it is an autoimmune disease that just eventually scars your bile ducts, and you end up with so many toxins in your liver that it just destroys it. So he had this disease, and then he also, I should say, he also had autoimmune hepatitis, and it just means that he had the autoimmune disease of the liver. His body was attacking his liver. So he had been diagnosed, I would say probably 6 or 7 years before I met him. And when I say he was in the best shape of his life, I didn't necessarily know that then, but what I saw him to be was, I mean, he was in incredible shape. I mean, he's a very, very big guy, like, I mean, 6'4" and just full of muscle.
Hmm.
And so it wasn't really to me, I was like, I didn't know anything about it. So it was just I appreciated him mentioning it to me and whatnot, but I was like, yeah, you're hot. It's fine. Like he didn't have any signs, so it wasn't really like on my like radar to be really concerned, I shouldn't say.
Did he tell you that he was gonna need a transplant at that time?
No, because he didn't really know that that was he really how he explained it was, he takes very good care of himself. Like he was on a really, good diet and he worked out and he felt great. So for
Yeah.
him, he said he did explain that, this is not a disease that goes away. This is something that, it does progress and, hopefully by taking care of your body, you can be okay. But ultimately, there is the possibility of a transplant, but he didn't think, in his head it wasn't going to happen to him. So
Right.
so really I think that might have been part of the reason why I didn't feel like it was something of like immediately that I needed to be concerned with. But again, I respected the fact that he gave me that insight and the option of, if this isn't going to work, then that's okay. That's okay. So, that was, yeah, I mean, really, really early on, this kind of started, but, during this was COVID. So the beginnings and kind of, it was like still uncharted waters there a little bit too. So, he really didn't have many like symptoms. He just had a high bilirubin and stuff like that. So it was probably maybe 3 months in at this point. So, you know, again, it seems crazy, but that's why I say it was love right away because we already knew at that point that we were meant to be together. But he had like he went in for his routine blood work and his bilirubin was like 25 and
Oh,
which is crazy high. And he was always so tan, which he is anyway, but I guess that is a side effect of your bilirubin.
yeah.
But and his eyes were really, really yellow. But anyway, so they called him and said, you need to get to the hospital. And he was like, what? Like it was so new to him and foreign, he didn't know. He'd never had to do that before. So I think, and he was like, I feel good. I don't get this. Like it was very weird, and probably scary, of course, for him. So that was, the COVID rules of 30 minutes a day,
Oh, yeah.
one person.
Yeah.
So who could visit. And so his son and I would switch off like a day of who would go up there. And that's whenever he sat me down one day that I was there and he just kind of patted the bed and he was like, I need you to come over and we need to talk. And I was like, okay. And he just was very like somber, but you could just tell something was eating away at him. And he said, I've never had to do this before. And he was like, I don't want you to have to do this with me. Like, this isn't fair to you. And if you want to go, I'm not going to judge you for it. He was like, it's just, I understand.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm not going anywhere. But inside I'm like, oh gosh, like what is next? Because I hadn't taken the time to educate myself really much about it because it was just not really, uh, again, something that was a big concern at the time. We were enjoying
Yeah.
ourselves, like just getting to know each other and stuff. So I went home that night, which I mean, it was sad because when he was telling me this, he was kind of laid back in the hospital bed and there was like this tear that just kind of rolled out of the corner of his eye. And I thought, I would never leave him like this. Like that's not,
Yeah.
can't help this any more than, anyone else who's got an autoimmune disease. So I I went home and immediately, of course, the panic set in and I was like, okay, what is this actually? So I started Googling everything about his autoimmune condition. And it took me down this like rabbit hole of just, liver transplant, da da da. And so I was just kind of reading on it, and this deal popped up like a little, I don't know, like a little video thing, and it just said living liver donor. And I was like, what? Like, what is that? So of course I click it and go down that path for a while. And at that point is whenever I was like, okay, well, I mean, problem solved. You've got
Yeah.
I'll give it to you. So,
Had
and
you not heard of a liver transplant like that before, like
oh
a
no.
living donor? No, you didn't
Mm-mm.
know about it.
No,
Yeah.
I knew nothing about it. And, honestly, I only knew of, as far as a living donor, the only thing I'd ever heard of was for a kidney, which I always found very
Mm.
fascinating.
Yeah.
But I did not know that there was a possibility of a liver donor like that, a living one. So no, I mean, it was like, but it really was this part of me that was just going, okay, great. But kind of a backstory on that too is, from before I ever met Pete, um, just who I am and just my belief, which is a very personal belief of just trusting God's path for my life.
Yeah.
And even through like this storm that I was in, I tried not to ever like say why. It was more like I just remember praying over and over, like, you didn't do this to me, but I do believe that you're going to lead me through this storm, and there's going to be a huge purpose in my life, and just use me for good. And I'll listen, just give me peace with it. I prayed that, I cannot tell you how many countless times, and I meant it. And I believed that there was going to be something mighty that he could use me for. And to, even if at the time, of course, I just thought it was okay, give hope to others that you can get through like hard times. So with that, when I got to this point of reading that, or I'm sorry, when I watched that video, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, is this why you put him in my life? Great. Like, it was serving that, you know, like purpose maybe. And I was listening. I was just ready. I was open to it. And so yeah, I mean that night kind of gave me just a lot of um peace knowing that hey, there's an option. Even if it wasn't me, hey, that's an incredible option to have.
Yeah.
So
So did you tell him what happened when you told him? Like, did you
yeah,
tell him
I
this is
did.
what I want to do for you?
That didn't go well, by the way. Um, yeah, so the next day, I mean, because when I got home, it was late. The next day I was so excited and I'm like, babe, did you know about this? Like, did you know that was a thing? And he was like, what? No. But the reason he didn't know is because that was still so early on, like he was healthy. They weren't really talking transplant
Right.
with him at the time. So he was kind of like, no. And I was like, well, that's great. I was like, you can have mine someday. So from then on, I joked with him all the time, like, well, you're gonna have mine someday. And he was like, I am not, like, at all. He was very uh well, okay. So he is a protector, a provider, and he's going to give to anyone else before he would ever take.
Right. Yeah.
Who he is as a person, 100%. So to be on the receiving end of that, he couldn't even wrap his head around that. It was not going to happen. And protecting me because of my kids, but really for anyone. He was like, I could never ask someone for a gift like that. Like, that's so amazing. Like, he
Yeah.
was amazed by it and so grateful that I would bring it up to him. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't like closed-minded at no, I would never. It was more like I can't imagine like someone doing that.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, will you just ask your doctor if that's even going to be like a possibility for you? And he was like, yeah, maybe. So we kind of we kind of made like I said, there was like this little window between me telling him And then, me always saying like randomly, I'd be like, well, you're gonna have mine someday. It's okay. Like, I got you, and but I meant it. And I cannot explain that. Um, I really can't explain it because it's almost one of those things where you go, there's really no word. I don't know, maybe there is a word for it, but I haven't found it yet. Of just truly having that inside me going, this is my journey. This is why I'm in his life. It might be for no other reason, but to know that I could do this someday for him, great,
Yeah.
you know, and he just had a harder time with that. But um couple months after that, so that was probably September, October, I end up getting COVID. This was right before Thanksgiving. I end up getting COVID and I mean like really, really sick. And of course, I gave it to him.
Yeah.
And so you know how that was back then. Like if you had COVID, you could be around someone who had COVID, but other
Right.
people, it was very, I mean, just unknown. People didn't know much about it.
Right.
So I was kind of getting over, like I was starting to feel better, and that's whenever he was like, "Oh man, like I think I'm getting it. Like I'm feeling terrible." And I was so worried about it because you heard so much about autoimmune disease and
Right.
COVID, how it just wrecked people. And of course, that was what happened to him. So, he lived in a different town than me. But so it was probably like, 30, 40 minutes away. And I would I would go over there and check on him. And by the day, he was getting so bad that I was like, I would have someone on the phone with me in case they needed to call the ambulance because it was so, I mean, I was terrified to walk in and see what I'd find. And it had ate all the muscle off his body in a matter of a couple weeks. Like, I think he lost like 24 pounds
Wow.
in a matter of weeks, and it was muscle mass. So he had gone from looking so healthy and of course like young and I was like, oh my gosh, it's hard to even recognize him. I mean, it ate him alive. And he had already started the itching, back whenever his bilirubin was so high. He did already start that, but this was like magnified. I mean, he had sores all over him. And it was terrible to watch. Like I can't imagine what he felt because watching it was sickening. I mean, it was suffering.
Yeah.
And so that's whenever things got very, very real for us and very serious of, okay, this looks a lot different after COVID.
Yeah. And you guys were still just dating at the time?
Yes.
Yeah.
We
And how,
had, yeah, we had been, at this point, we had probably been dating, I would say 5 months, 6 months.
okay.
And so it all, I mean, really like our first 3 months were the only regular normal life we've had
Right.
before all of this. So yeah, yeah, probably, yeah, right at that, 5, 6 months. And it was so like, okay, so Thanksgiving, of course, looked different for us. He was sick, and that's whenever of course, his doctor was like, we're gonna have to do something. This isn't gonna reverse. It's just I mean, it's just gonna progress.
Yeah.
So, in January, they said you're going to need to be put on the transplant list. And I mean, at this point, he's like yellow. He itches so bad and is suffering so hard that I would have like exfoliating mitts that I would put on my hands. And the only time I could get him to even have any kind of like rest would be if I was just sitting there like kind of putting those over his like back or his arms or whatever and just giving him a little bit of reprieve for like that second. It was
Yeah.
so sad. Um, but yeah, so that was in January and okay, so whenever they told him that, I went to the Baylor Scott and White website and I applied to be a donor, which several people did. But I just didn't tell him that I did it until after. And so afterwards I was like, well, I applied and he was like, Brady, I'm never going to take that from you. You've got your kids and we have to, my focus is making sure you're okay. And I kind of at that point had to tell him, this is bigger than you and me. This isn't necessarily, I mean, it is, this is huge, but my heart is, it wasn't, and I don't mean this bad because of course I loved him and I would have done it any day for him. But when you have, like, to me, I would have done that for someone who needed it regardless, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of had to explain that to him that this is this is a little bit deeper than that. This is a journey that I've been on for a long time and prayed for forever, of just knowing, like, when I feel that peace inside my heart and in my soul, I have to pay attention. And that's just who I am on anything. So I was like, don't discredit that I have this peace with it, and that I do know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I said, I'm gonna go, like, or I said I applied. So if I was someone's match or whatever, I'm gonna be on that table, and you can either be next to me getting it done or someone else will. But I know this is where I'm supposed to be. And I mean, and I think at that point he just kind of, I mean, girls, we usually get our way. So he
Right.
kind of just gave up. It was kind of more like probably just a pacifier to me. So he was like, okay, but he was like, the chances of it being, anything, just prepare yourself for that. He was like, I know that you feel that way, but he's a realist, and just, he was like, you've got to be prepared for the fact that the chances of that are so slim.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, he kind of just let me, he was kind of like, okay. And he kept saying over and over, like, I appreciate that you're so passionate about it, or that you care so much that you would be selfless and do that. But he just, it was very hard for him to accept that he was going to need someone's help, because at that point he had finally talked to the doctor.
Yeah.
And they had said, yes, a living donor would actually be your best bet, because he lived in Hereford, and you need to be within like 2 hours of your transplant center, which was in
Right.
Dallas. And so you could be on the list and be even high on the list, but if you're not within 2 hours away, I mean, you're not going to probably, have that chance at getting it. So he had even had to, like, think about relocating. Well, that really wasn't an option with his job. And so, they were like, yes, absolutely, all about the living donor side of it.
Yeah.
So that's when things kind of changed with that.
Yeah. And so I was going to ask you about your kids. How old are your kids?
So my kids, at the time, well, they're 18 and 16 now, but at the time they were 11, well, they just had their birthdays probably when all this was happening, and they were 12 and 14. No, okay. They had just had their birthdays. They were 13 and 15 actually.
Okay.
Um, and so I'm very open with my kids. They, like, so my son is the older one, and then I have a daughter. And I'm very open with them because they are my priority. Their well-being is obviously at the forefront of my thoughts always. So, um, whenever we were going through this, they had taken such a liking to Pete, and were really concerned with him. So whenever it got really, really bad, I had told him, I'm, like, hey, did y'all know about living donors? I was just always talking about it to them or to whoever, because it was just important for them to know, like, I needed to know how they were going to feel about it. But anyway, so just kind of, you just kind of put it out there a little bit. And
Yeah.
one night we were driving down the street. I know exactly where we were, and it was just Trayson and I in the car. And he said, Mom, um, is Pete gonna die? And I remember just looking at him, and, oh, sorry.
Okay.
And I had to tell him, like, without a donor, then yes. I mean, that's what that is. And he looked at me and he said, "Can he have mine?" And a 15-year-old boy who, to have a heart like that, was was again that piece that I was needing. I needed to know that if he cared that much and if Pete meant that much to him, then I am the tool that could be used for that, that he can't, and it just it was just one of those things where I was like, I love your heart.
Yeah.
Um, and it meant so much to me as a mom that he would do that. But, I knew again that was just another added like layer of justification for me of going, okay, I'm on the right path. Like I know I am. And we went home and I talked to Talis and I said, I said, I know that they knew that I had applied. And I said, but how do y'all really feel? Like, how do you really feel? And she was like, I really would want you to do it. And so um, that meant the world to me because without them, it would have never happened.
Yeah. Did
So,
you ever tell Pete about that?
yes, yes.
And how did he feel about that? Like, was
Oh,
he
gosh.
so emotional about that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, when you sit there and know that you mean that much to someone or to kids like that speaks volumes to who he is as a person and why I fell for him so hard because he loves his people unconditionally. And for him to, and I mean, again, this is early on, but for him to be so good to my kids was a gift, like you're like, what? And it just, I don't know, it was powerful to say the least for him to hear of a 15-year-old boy being mature enough to say something like that and to have
Yeah.
a heart that would say that. But I say all the time, that is, I'll say it, that's what saved his life was them. Because
Yeah.
without that, I would have never been able to have the peace that I needed.
Yeah.
So,
So after you applied, how long did it take? Well, what did you have to do after you applied? So I know there's a bunch of, testing and stuff that you have to do, right?
yes, yes. So, okay, so I applied, I want to say, I believe I applied like around January 21st, which,
Yeah.
anyway, and so I was in the middle of a move at the time also. And so okay, so March, let's say, yeah, probably 5 weeks. Um, because I think they were dealing with a lot of insurance. There's so many steps in the process for him of even being accepted, I guess, onto the list. And so they go through all the, insurance protocol or whatever. And so it takes a little bit of time, but around March, oh, I think it was March 6th, I checked my voicemails, which was from like March 4th. I had a voice I thought was spam, and it was like 10:30 at night, and I'm just kind of scrolling through, kind of, cleaning up, voicemails and whatnot. And I'm like, what? It said Baylor Scott and White. And I immediately was like, my heart just kind of sank. And um and I listened and it was Lana, the coordinator, and she was saying that the transplant team had met and that they wanted to move forward with me and if I wanted to. Which the craziest thing of all was everyone else had already received like letters of denial, I guess. So Pete told me, he said, just be prepared. You're going to have a letter in the mail because of your size. I'm like, okay. Anyway, I mean, I was like, that's probably the only thing that was super offensive is that here he is, this big guy, and I'm I guess the size he needs. So, but not really. It was funny though. We just joke about it. But So yeah, so we were prepared that I was going to be denied too. So it was kind of off the radar and okay, what next? So whenever that happened, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. It's me. It's totally me. So that or no, I'm sorry, that night at 10:30, I wake him up and I call him and I'm like, you're not going to believe this. I'm in tears. And he just is quiet. I was like, hey, I was like, I'm excited. What's going on? And he just said, I can't. He was like, Brandi, I have to like protect you. I can't ask you to do this. Like, that's so much. And he just kept saying, thank you for having this heart, but it's not, I can't say yes to you doing it. And I was like, I said, Pete, I have two kids and I protect them over everything. And I said, but they have their mom and this is safe. I had watched every video you could ever watch at that point. I knew that it was going to be safe. I wasn't worried about that. And I said, but you have two kids and they need their dad. Like his kids adore him and he is a phenomenal dad. And I'm like, is it okay for them to have to bury their dad whenever we have what could potentially be a solution? I was like, it's crazy. Like, we can't do that. I couldn't do that to them. Like, that's not fair to them or to his parents or his sister or all the people that love him. You know, it's just, I was like, this is going to fix all that. So again, I kind of got my way and he was like, okay. And I just reminded him of the whole, like, please, like, let me have this, journey for myself. This is healing me too. Knowing that I'm paying attention to a greater good. This isn't about just you and me. And I just kept kind of reiterating that to him. And anyway, so he was like, okay. And he goes, just again, realize that, there's a very good chance that even when you get down there and do all your testing, that I might not like the slim chance of this being you is crazy. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, just let me do my thing though. So I get down there. I took my mom with me actually. So that was this was April 1st. So it was, like 2 months
Yeah.
from when we really kind of started the whole transplant deal. And it was amazing to me. One thing that I think was so incredible was how much they protect the donor at Baylor Scott and White. I was their priority. I was their concern. They were never ever going to let anything happen to me. If there was any kind of slim chance of it not being um healthy for me, they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And they protected me with that or with making sure that this was on my own free will that I did that. I mean, they had layer after layer of just making sure that this was what I chose. So I had my mom with me and they even asked her questions like, okay, how are you? What is your relation to Brandi? And she'd have to say, I'm her mom. Is there any relation that you have to the recipient? Which I hope not. I mean, if I'm dating him, I hope my mom's not related to both of us. That'd be weird. Um, so anyway, but it was like, if so, she was gonna have to leave the room because they wanted to make sure that I was able to say whatever I needed to say in there. And I would,
Right.
it was incredible. I mean, it was a well-oiled machine to say the least. And so, yeah, I mean, it was 17 vials of blood the first day and an MRI and countless people coming in to check on my like where I am mentally with it, emotionally, physically. I mean, it was a gambit. I mean, just the whole gambit of nothing was going to slip through the cracks. They were going to
Yeah.
make sure that I was completely okay to do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it was nuts. It was crazy. So, we met with a social worker. Or I mean, she might, I don't remember something. There were so many of them. And I remember her asking me the question, it was like little things like this, and I was terrified that I was going to give the wrong answer and it would ruin everything. Like I was
Yeah.
like, you know, so they were like, well, how do you handle stress? And I'm sitting there, I was like, "Well, I don't know, I cuss. Like, and I thought she was gonna fall out of her chair. And my mom's like, Brandy, I think they were looking at something like exercise. Like that would have been a sufficient answer. So anyway, I was like, oh yeah. Anyway, so it's like it's good to make kind of a little bit light of some of this situation, but
Yeah.
it was crazy. I mean, just nuts. And so the second day was the MRI, and I met with Dr. Gupta, who was my surgeon, and he just kept telling me that my size difference was going to be a concern because I mean, I'm 5'8", he's 6'4", and so our size difference was way way off, and he was like, that's probably, I mean, that could be an issue. But he said the connectors that will tie into the biliary tree are going to be the main or a big concern. Like it has to be enough for you, and we give him the rest. Like it was even to that, like I said, they always were focused on the donor.
Yeah.
Of we've got to make sure that everything's perfect for you, and then we give him what we can. And so I just remember the connectors were a big, big deal. And so, and you're looking at all the blood work and everything had to be um a match, or you're just like, how in the world does this happen? It's crazy.
Yeah. So
So
when
we
did you find out? Oh, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
you go ahead.
I was just gonna say when did you find out or how did you feel whenever they said, yes, you are a match, it's a go?
So okay, so when we left the hospital that day, my mom, so I do need to make mention of this because my family is incredible. I have a support system like no other. I have a huge family. Um, and I fully what I mean, I was prepared and ready for someone out of my giant family of 9 siblings. I mean, we have step half whole, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
That someone would maybe say, "Hey, what are you doing?" Not one. I mean, they were absolutely on our team. They were team Pete and Brandy all the way. And when we walked out of the hospital that day, the second day, my mom said, Brandy, if you are his match, then she said, there is no denying that you're exactly right. You know exactly where you need to be, and we support you. We love you guys, and we want what's best. And we know that um, you are not taking this lightly. And she was like, we've got y'all. Like, and I look back at that and I think, wow, as a mom, that's that's incredible to have a support system like that. When, call me crazy, but if that's Taos sitting there, I mean, I'd be like, okay, yes, but I'm so proud. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like, that gave me so much, again, so much peace that, okay, it's me. And so, okay, so they said it was going to be 5 or 6 days from testing to when we got our results. So, it was a Wednesday, and this was April 7th. Um, Pete was supposed to come in to Amarillo for his birthday dinner, and we hadn't heard anything. And we knew that it was going to be either Wednesday or Thursday. So this was 5:30. And he called me to tell me, okay, I'm going to get in the shower and then I'll be heading in. I was like, okay. And he's like, I've been thinking about this. And he said, I just need you to know that today I have decided that this just isn't, it's not up to us. This is God's will. So if it's supposed to be us, then it will be, but I'm going to live my life. He said, I want to live this life and enjoy us and enjoy our time. And he's like, so tonight, let's just enjoy my birthday. Like, he's like, I don't want it. It's hard enough for him to have emotion at this point because he was on so much medication to numb his nerves, which was he was on Zoloft to numb the nerves. So it also numbed emotions and anything else. I mean, it was kind of zombie-like, I guess, because of how high a dose he was on. But I was like, okay, deal. And when we got off the phone, I walked into my house and I put my phone on my kitchen island and the phone rings and it's Baylor Scott and White. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding. So this was within 3 minutes, maybe, of us just sitting here saying we're gonna just give it up. It's
Yeah.
not for us to worry. And it was Lana again. And she was like, hey, and she's always so jolly. And I was like, hi. And she went on to tell me, she was like, okay, I've got amazing news for you. You're his match. She goes, you're actually a perfect match. And I was like, what? I was like, are you kidding? Like for real? And I mean, I just remember earlier on that day, I had gotten my MRI results in on my phone and I didn't tell Pete. But I was like, there was this part of me that my heart just sank because I was at the shampoo bowl at the salon and I'm reading it. And I'm like, it said that I had a very short connector on the top. Now, I don't know the exact terminology, but that's what it was. And
Yeah.
I was like, I just remember I was devastated thinking all of this goes down to one connector. And it was like, I just felt like I'd been kicked in the gut, you know?
Yeah.
But I just knew that like I wasn't going to say anything till I knew. And anyway, so I asked her, I was like, so what? I was like, okay, what about the connector? She was like, well, I want you to talk to Dr. Gupta. So anyway, when I talked to him, he said, oh, there is no denying that your anatomy is weird. He said, but it actually worked out perfectly for us. He said it made it easier. My job was easier because of that. And again, you just go, these things, this is not me doing this. This is a way, way
Yeah.
above anything I could be doing. This was, you can't deny where that comes from. I can't. Now, I mean, that's, like I said, my personal belief, but it was unbelievable. I just remember
Yeah.
thinking, he's in the shower right now coming here. And I was overwhelmed with joy. Um, I don't, it's so hard to even describe that because it was like also just that reassurance of everything I had felt from the very beginning and listening to my heart, my gut, my soul, everything that I had felt led to do. And I went ahead and did it. And then I'm seeing this and I'm like, thank you, God. Like, this is everything I needed.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, when I got off the phone with Lana, I had about 30 minutes probably. I was dropping Taos off at volleyball and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have like 30 minutes to figure out how I'm going to tell him this news." So the first thing I did was call his parents. And that was still to this day, I'll never forget what that sounded like. So I called them and I said, "This is just something that no parent should have to wait to hear." And they were both on the phone. And I said, I'm a perfect match for Pete. I said, so he's getting a liver. And his mom, oh gosh, as a mom, it was crazy. Like she let out this squeal, laugh, cry. Uh, it was like there wasn't a word. It was a sound,
Yeah.
just started giggling and she's like, oh my gosh, thank you, thank you. Like, and of course his dad is just, just this, he's precious. And he's like, just thank you. Like, just, you could just tell the relief that was placed on them as parents. And like, honestly, like what it did for me was I'm like it probably did more like it's almost selfish. I'm like I feel like I
Yeah.
grew so much from it that
Yeah.
you just until you're in a situation like that where you know that that is in your hands and that if you don't listen, the outcome looks totally different.
Yeah.
And I think that is just such a message that now I realize how important it is.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry I got on I got
Oh, that's okay.
sidetracked there, but yeah, so I said, just promise me you will not call him. I said, I'm meeting him right now for his birthday dinner because his birthday's on the 10th, but I was going to be in Dallas with Taos for a volleyball tournament. And so I wasn't going to see him. So anyway, I was like, do not call him, do not call anyone. Like, just we'll call you back here in a little bit. So I call our friends that we were meeting and I'm like, hey, I need y'all to have like y'all gotta have your cameras ready, like video, whatever. So whenever I tell Pete's friend, he's like, he's like, I'm about to wreck the truck. I mean, he was so freaking excited. And he's like, oh my gosh, okay. So I went into CVS and I just ran to get a card. I was like, I don't have anything else. I can't prepare for it. There wasn't anything I could do. And this card was like, it was a black card with white lettering and it said, I've got something for you. I was like, well, I didn't even take any time to read the inside. I was like, that's good enough. So I just scratch out whatever was on the inside and I put, how about I give you my liver or we share one at least. And I wrap it up, put his name on it, and off we were to Cask and Cork, which is where we met. Because I called them and I was like, okay, crazy request. Do you have anything on the rooftop? And they were like, no, we're booked. And I said, okay. I said, I don't want to have to do this because like I'm not typically one who would ever be like, yeah, but so I tell them, I'm like, okay, this is where we met, but I have the most important news I could ever share with him. I'm gonna be an organ donor for him. And they were like, hold on. They were like, hey, we're making this happen. Just get here. So it was
Oh,
crazy
that's
what
nice.
happens in 30 minutes, of you what you can get done. But so anyway, yeah. So then
Wow. So
yeah.
that what did they do? Just, put everybody else back inside for you guys?
No, there
Uh,
were people out there with us, but they
oh,
did make a table for us. So um,
okay.
yeah, so he had no idea, of course, that it was coming. So um we're just sitting there and I said, hey, I was like, you want to open that? And so they kind of started getting their cameras ready. And he's reading it and he's like, and again, remember, I mean, being on Zoloft and stuff, you're kind of numb anyway, but it was like we had just been on the phone, so he just could not wrap his head around why I would say that. It was almost like he thought it was a sick joke, like I had had that card for a while or something, and just like, oh, happy birthday, I'll give you, like, how I always did before, like, oh, you're gonna have mine someday. So he
Yeah.
kind of looks up at me and he's like, yeah, but we don't know. And I was like, no, we do. I said right when we hung up, I got the phone call and I said, I'm actually like a perfect match. And he is just beside himself. And it was disbelief that it got to this point and that here I am saying, yeah, it's happening. And his friends they're crying and I'm tearing up and he just stands up and just hugs me and he just whispers to me, thank you for saving my life. I was like, I don't see it that way. Now, for other people, absolutely I do, but in my head, it was just no, I mean, this is my purpose. Um, but for him, it was getting to have his kids and getting to have his life and his parents and
Yeah.
the relief that had to be uh was I'm sure pretty outstanding. Probably what he carried with him that he wouldn't show weakness. That's just him.
Yeah.
Always the tough guy and can't show weakness because um what's that going to do for him in that situation?
Yeah.
So that relief was it showed that it was definitely a lot.
And at that point, how long had you guys been together?
Um not maybe 10 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, it was crazy. I'm like, really, again, it goes back to that whole, when you see everything in hindsight, it's so easy for us to go, yeah, I mean, the way it all happened, and even the things in between, you're like, or the things that happened to lead up you know, um, it's it's crazy. Like, I forgot to mention that, so I'm just not someone who puts myself out there or is on the hunt. I'm not a hunter. It's like I didn't I if I really just didn't want to ever hurt again. So it was kind of better for me to not find happiness in someone else, which I'm always going to find happiness in myself, but it was scary. Like being vulnerable was scary. But
Yeah.
whatever that was, I had to pay attention to it because, like I said, it was only one other time that I had ever felt that like draw, but it wasn't a draw like because of someone's looks. It was a draw like I was tied to that person for some reason. And that was like a year before I had met Pete. So I was trying to be very like it was weird that it stuck with me. I was at a golf course that night and I was sitting at a table and maybe 5 minutes before I left, a group of people came and sat down. Never spoke to the person across the room or across the table from me, never knew his name, never heard him, yeah, like talk, nothing. But for whatever reason, there was this weird like thing inside me that stuck with me, like that there was something, there was a connection of something. It was weird.
Yeah.
So when I had that with Pete, I told him, I said, I don't do this. It only happened to me one other time. And I was like, that tells you right there that I'm not into that. And I'm telling him the story, and he's like, wait. He said, that was me sitting at the table. And I was like, what? He tells me who he was sitting by, which was exactly who it was. And I'm like, so what I mean by that, like, yes, it was 10 months, but we did a lot of life in 10 months. And then to have a seed like that being planted way before, a year before, and what are the odds of that being the same person?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have recognized him from then. It was just the fastest little meeting. Um, I'm like, so it's crazy to me how much life can happen in a short amount of time,
Yeah.
when it's meant to be.
Yeah. For sure. So,
So,
so from that moment that you told him at the restaurant until the actual transplant day, how much time was that?
so we had our surgery on April 26th of 2021. So,
Okay.
it was what, maybe like 3
Oh,
weeks.
that's not long at all.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like 2 weeks, I guess, probably. Yeah, it was fast. I mean, so yeah, it was crazy. I mean, just the prep that, goes into that and just getting
Yeah.
everyone involved to make it happen. It was
Yeah.
pretty crazy how we orchestrated it all for sure.
And how was the how did it go for him and for you both?
So, so for me, it was great. We went down a couple days before, just the two of us, uh, and then we kind of, did all the stuff that you have to do, of course, ahead of time and the COVID test and whatnot. Everything was fine. The hardest part for me was, I mean, yes, it physically, I mean, no one can deny that it's not comfortable, but totally worth it. I would do it a million times over.
Yeah.
But for me, it was more of the, uh, the closer we got, it was like my mom was staying with my kids until the day before because I wanted them to have as normal of a, you know, uh, transition into me being gone that long. Um, so she was staying with them, and then my cousin in Dallas went to Amarillo and took care. She played mom for the week, or a little bit longer. But so there was this day, 2 days before the surgery. It was that night, and I was talking to my kids, and this overwhelming sense of like, it wasn't panic because the whole time I knew that this was meant to be, but it was like that responsibility you have as a mom. Like I'm their person.
Yeah,
It was like making sure they were okay. Like I felt like I needed to make sure they were okay. And and that was really, really hard for me that day. Like I bawled, and then I was like not wanting Pete to know that I was crying. So I'm out in the lobby, like ugly crying with my kids on the phone. And they're like, Mom, we are so happy. Like they just gave me so much reassurance. But I certainly never wanted him to feel like that was me second guessing. It wasn't. It was just like as a mom, you want to make sure everything is okay. And
for sure.
whatever. And it was like this weird, overwhelming feeling. But yeah, as far as surgery goes, um, for me, it was fine. I went in first um, and went out. When I came out, I was, you know, healthy, happy. It was all fine. Pete, his surgery was flawless in the beginning. And that next morning he came out or he came to my room. And I mean, I'm sitting there with like, I mean, I hate saying this, but like my barf bag in my like on my chest. And I mean, my lips are pale. I have a picture of it now. I'm like, thanks, guys. Um, and I felt terrible that morning. Like I was like, oh my gosh. And here comes Pete bebopping in my room. And I was like, it was like Superman. I'm like, wait, how did you have yours taken out, a new one coming in, and you're in here like feeling great? It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And but yeah, I mean, he was awesome. Now, a few days later, I would say it was like um probably around day 6, he was getting really sick and he ended up having an infection. So they had to go in and do a whole other surgery, which was terrifying. I was over actually getting cleared. This is probably day 9 or 10 at this point. I was getting cleared and was, I walked into his room because that was my daily exercise, go from the hotel to the
Yeah,
hospital, and he wasn't in there. And I was like, it just scared me to death. And his mom said they had to take him back. And I'm like, and so the panic of thinking, what did I do? Like, did I kill him? Like, it was
yeah,
terrifying. So, but after that, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of complications, like as far as,
yeah,
uh, you know, from that side of him. But for me, it was perfect. It was crazy. I mean, couldn't have
yeah.
had a better, outcome.
And how is he feeling now? Is he back to being super muscular
Yeah.
and
So
healthy?
he is so healthy. We are, yeah, like everything you wouldn't know that anything happened to him. Like he lives a totally normal life other than the medications, every day, um, time. But yeah, I mean, he's healthy as he can be. Um, Now he's super excited for the transplant games because he's determined to win a gold medal in something, which
Yeah,
will be good because it's going to get him back to the gym and stuff like that. But he has a very physical job anyway. He works with cattle, and so he's always doing stuff. So he just naturally kind
yeah,
of has a more athletic build. But yeah, he played college football, so he's all about the athletic type stuff. So he's ready.
Did you guys get married?
We did, yes. So that's kind of another layer where, I mean, we have a beautiful love story by all means, but it's not all sprinkled with pixie dust. There was after he got out of that second surgery, I honestly was like, oh, yeah. He like all the meds that, it was crazy. I mean, he was hallucinating and it was
Yeah,
nuts. And anyway, at that point, I was like, yeah, you're gonna be living with your parents because I don't know, like I draw the line. He was way too much to handle. So, anyway, but yeah, so it was really hard for a little bit. Like when he got home, it was he struggled a lot with the whole feeling like indebted to me or like he was going to owe me for life no matter how much I told him before, like it doesn't matter what happens with you and me. This is why I'm in your life. I know that. and you don't owe me anything. So I wanted to make that clear, and I wanted to have enough time after the surgery that it wasn't like we were just jumping into something else out of, just the feelings, all the
Yeah.
feelings. I just didn't want that because to me it would be irresponsible, and do us an injustice. So he didn't feel that way. Like I think he did a lot of reflection, of course, being in there, and just I knew that I mean, he expressed that he wanted to marry me, but I was like, oh yeah, I mean, no, you're crazy. Like he was nuts with his meds. I'm like, I am not agreeing to this right now. So anyway, I mean, we had to go through a little bit, and there was a point where I was like, I think we might need a break, just so he could get himself like back to a healthier state, like mentally with what happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, one night we were sitting on my patio, and it was the night that I was like, I really feel like we're gonna need to do something different here. And I told him, I said, I said, Pete, I can't, it is a gift. Like you can't repay that, but you can't punish yourself or me for something that you can't. There's never going to be a time that you repay someone for the gift of life. But I said, how do you want me to repay you for being good to my kids? And he kind of looked at me like, what? And I said, how am I supposed to repay you for that? Like, what do you want? And he was like, nothing. And I said, exactly. It's what our heart, like, it's in your heart to do that. It's out of love. It's not something you repay. And it really, that was the pivotal moment where we were able to get past that hurdle and move into the idea of marriage. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, it was, it was interesting for a minute, but
Yeah.
we went to my cabin in Colorado, my family's cabin, and my grandparents built it, when I was 3. So it's just been a part of our life forever. And they had this rock that's right outside the cabin, and every couple has to go on this rock, and they take a picture of them kissing, and they have like everyone who's ever been to our cabin, they just collect all these pictures. Anyway, so we just named it Kissing Rock. Well, so
Uh-huh.
he proposed to me on Kissing Rock, which was so special.
Oh,
I was like, I couldn't have found a better place, and it was very, very powerful for sure, and
yeah.
special. So
That's
yeah,
sweet.
yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fantastic. I think that really is a true love story, from the very start. I think that's such a beautiful thing that you guys get to share now for the rest of your lives. And when you were talking about him wanting to, repay you or always feeling like he had to pay you back, I think as transplant recipients, like for myself, I haven't met my donor's family, but it's something that we feel so incredibly grateful for. And I think deep down, we all know we can't repay that. And
Mhm.
so I always say, um, I I just want to do things that my donor is up in heaven, who I want my donor to be able to say, I'm so proud of you, like whenever I meet him in heaven. And so that's how I feel like I'm repaying my donor's family, is by doing good things and living my best life and doing the best I can for my donor to be proud of me. And so I I could relate to Pete with the way he was feeling for you, because I feel the same way with my donor. It's just something that we're so grateful for, and we can't pay it back. We can't pay anybody back for that gift. And so it's hard, but I think you telling him that probably helped him understand. And I can also see it on the other side, like when somebody's sick, or like everybody wants to help, everybody wants to do whatever they can for the person that they love. So like
Right.
it's just a circle of
Abs-
feelings.
Absolutely it is. And and yeah, I mean, it is. It's crazy how that works. But I mean, to me, it's such a beautiful story of goodness. And I feel like our
Yeah.
world needs so much of that right now.
Yeah.
And to be able to share things like that or just like restore our faith in humanity. You
Yeah.
know, to me, it's like a good story of kindness
Yeah.
goes a long way, you know,
Yeah.
and thank God for organ donors and their families
Yeah.
who are putting their own, emotions aside for a minute to see the good that they could do for the world in a time where they're hurting the most. I mean, it's the amount of respect that I have for that is crazy. I mean, you can't put a word on that really. Like,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And, you know, I wouldn't change it for anything. It's been the most rewarding thing I could have ever done. And again, it's almost like you feel selfish because it was so
Yeah.
rewarding, you know? And
Yeah.
I remember when Dr. Gupta walked into my room when he was releasing me to go home and he said, congratulations, you're a hero. And I was like, oh. I said, and I 100% believe that on other people, but I said, I said, I'm just the tool. I was like, I was the tool that was needed, but I said, the heroes are every single person who is involved in a transplant team and just your ability. Like nothing happens with his ability and not the tool and of the organ and vice versa. How much good would I be if I didn't have him, like, or the coordinators, or you just look at
Yeah.
everyone involved and you're like, it's a miracle. I mean,
Yeah.
and to see you, speak on your end of that is, it's like you get to be here now and serve a purpose on this earth that is huge. Like, thank you for your dedication and your passion to spreading the word because you are making your donor proud. What you're doing with this and saving who knows how many people's lives by educating the world on what this is huge.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
and people like me say thank you to you because if it was not for people like you, Pete could have very easily had a different outcome because um I wouldn't have known about being a living donor or whatever if it wasn't for other people putting their story out there. So again, I mean, it is people like you who have made a huge impact in this world. And props to you and keep
Well,
doing whatever it is you're doing because it is working.
well, thank you. I appreciate those words. And just on the back of that, I do this so people can hear stories like yours and be inspired to save lives and become heroes. So I think we're all together. We're all in this together, and that's the
Absolutely.
most important thing.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing what you did. And I'm sure Pete, well, we know that Pete is incredibly grateful, and so is his family and everybody who knows him. So you might not consider yourself a hero, but you are to many people.
Oh,
So I love living donors. I love hearing their stories. I love talking to them. And so I think it's incredible. Living
yeah.
donors are incredible people. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. And again, I mean, I feel like it's my passion and purpose too, to not let that story end with us. Like if we
yeah,
can help one other person, it's worth it to be an advocate and to kind of plug in and listen, again, it's like listen to my heart and continue.
yeah,
Continue seeing how we can impact others. There's nothing more rewarding than that.
yeah, for sure.
So
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
hey,
And I wish you and Pete the best and the longest, happiest life together.
thank you.
And I think that you have a great love story, and I can't wait to
Oh,
share it with people.
oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It was an honor to be here.
They're welcome. All right. Well, you have a great day. And
Thank
thanks
you
again for
so
coming on.
much. Absolutely. I appreciate it. It was very nice meeting you.
Thank you for listening to the Pre to Post Transplant podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook. Oh, and if you have not signed up to be an organ donor, please visit www.organdonor.gov and register today. You too can save lives.